Already together.
Okay. Welcome back to the Transportation House Committee. This afternoon, we'll be talking about Agency of Transportation, public transportation adjustments, moving from urban to rural services with Green Mountain Transit. And Ross McDonald is here. Do you want to go ahead and start?
Thank you. Ross McDonald, Public Transit Program Manager at VTrans. And this is we're getting to the culmination of a 2-year program, whether it's the legislative study to assess options that we're discussing today, working with all the boards to gain concurrence and support for these types of changes. These weren't easily arrived at. But for VTrans role, what we've done is, other than the legislative report and advocated for this change, we have contracted a consultant to help all 3 entities, GMT, TVT, and RCT, to help with the waterfall list of all the items that are required for the transfer. And Dan Courier, our lead coordinator, is been assigned to be the coordinator for all 3 of those entities at once, so that we have internal coordination abilities. And we've already been making changes to the grain agreements as RCT has taken on Franklin Grand Isle, so that we can adjust and assign awards accordingly throughout the building of this new structure. So with that, I will just turn it back over to the committee and hear from the people doing the actual work, as we're kind of along for the ride at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just before we do that, just a quick overview. Here are the rural areas, that are going to be taken over by, are going to take over from Green Mountain Transit, and sort of the timing, unless that's actually in the presentation.
No, and absolutely. For us, we approached GMT 13, 14 years ago, when one of the providers went out of business in this region, and asked them to stand up a rural division and take on not only the urban 5307 program, but the one of the entities for the rural services. And they did that, and sharing resources, looking at the management of those 2 distinct entities. The FTA requires that all the funds are separate and distinct. And after so many years with RCT and TVT, that used to be Actor and Stagecoach, they got together. We had 2 strong rural entities that were now in a better position to take on those rural services. They also, have a different cost per hour, and do the same call center for the O&D program and others. So we thought this made a lot of sense conceptually. And as we work through these iterations, it has been heartening to see that a lot of the benefits that we were expecting do seem to be coming to fruition at this time. Is there any other context I can provide?
I think that's good.
Okay, thank you. Plates next.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be here talking to you about what has been a really great experience. And I have just about everything. Everything I'm going to say is positive. And I want to start off by letting you all know that in September, we did an employee and a board engagement survey, which is something that we routinely do just to make sure that we're sort of in alignment with our workforce and where our board is at. And when asked, is GMT heading in a positive direction? 0% of the respondents indicated that they thought that GMT was moving in the wrong direction. And so it just pleases me immensely that our workforce and our board really sees this direction from the rural transfer as the right thing to do, that there is not dissension about the approach. And so internally, we have this broad support. Externally, it has been a really great experience working with VTrans, TVT, and RCT. I'm going to say something because people may have noticed sometimes I'm argumentative. I want it for the record that we even had a great experience working with VTrans. We sometimes, struggle with our frenemy relationship with VTrans, but this experience was great. We had a lot of positive work with Ross and Dan, and they've been good partners with this process. Been so impressed with RCT and Caleb's group of folks. As I'll let him talk about, the fact that they were able to accelerate the transfer really just shows how coordinated and organized they are. And I couldn't be more impressed with how they've operated in taking on our service in Franklin and Grand Isle County. And also have really enjoyed working with Jim Moulton. And one of the things that we've tried to do is to try to manage Washington County somewhat jointly, so that as we move forward, that whatever it is that GMT is trying to do to improve things in Washington County is going to match in alignment with the direction that TVT wants to go in. And so you have a memo from our board of directors that kind of highlights all of the goodness, and so I feel like it probably makes more sense to turn things over to my better looking counterparts at RCT and TVT so that they can talk about their experience, but also certainly happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
And
Thank you.
RCTs and say the first ones that people are doing.
Well, I'm picking up where we're at, so if we're going to Caleb next, or we're going to Jim next, that's where we're at with the question. My apologies for the meeting that the vice chair and I were at, for being a little bit late. Thank you very much for getting things started. Ross, thank you for the summary, and Clayton. So yes, Caleb, why don't you come up? I didn't hear about anybody on particular time delay or time constraint, so we can go from here. We're talking about transfer in Franklin and Grand Isle and counties, right?
Yes.
And anywhere else you want to go in that direction?
Thank you. For the record, Caleb Grant from Rural Community Transportation. I feel a little bit about like the weather reporter standing in the middle of a hurricane saying it's raining. But we did accelerate the process. I believe the recommendation was to transition in July of 26. Just working with GMT and some of their staffing challenges in the call center, it seemed to make sense for us to transition a little bit expeditiously. So on January 1, we officially made the transition to be the provider for Franklin, and the technical provider, although Cider does the bulk of the work in Grand Isle, and the Stowe Mountain Road will transition in July 1. As well as the O&D subcontract for Chittenden County as of July 1 as well. So it has been a fantastic experience. The Franklin community is an engaged and impassioned community as it relates to both transportation, but also human and health services. Really welcoming as far as including me in community conversations. We've contracted Stedman Hill to update our transit development plan to include Franklin and Grand Isle County, and was actually able to partner with a planning commission who was doing a parallel study on transportation needs in the county. So we're combining those two efforts, and we'll work collaboratively to address the transportation landscape of Franklin County and how that relates to the transit development plan for rural community transportation. So 100% of the GMT employees of which we extended an offer accepted and have joined enthusiastically. We begin union negotiations this Friday. So the drivers chose to continue in a unionized unit, and look forward to that process and their opportunity to advocate for what is 9 drivers and a bit more of a concentrated evaluation of their needs and wants, as opposed to kind of being lumped with a larger representation of Burlington drivers as well as Berlin drivers. So interested to see those outcomes, but very optimistic. I think from every experience I've had with the drivers, they remain very passenger focused and care very much about the outcomes, and seem to align very well with RCT's mission, which is critical to the success of the expansion. And other than that, it's really just battling against technologies that seem to fail. You know, Verizon SIM cards miscomputed and transitioning phones which don't want to get past firewalls and things like that. It's kind of like buying a new house where you find that you know, the previous owner may have been used to things, and all of a sudden you go, "What is this?" And but in reality, we're working through all those bumps, and it is by every shape and measure a positive experience in the first 2 months, and hopefully we'll continue to improve as we go forward.
What was the official transition date? I'm sorry, I didn't write that down.
January 1,
It was.
which for future reference is a terrible time to transition everything. Just because, you know, all the little things that have to get done leading into that, having large federal holidays leading into that can complicate things, but from a budgetary standpoint, made perfect sense and remains to make perfect sense. So all learning aside, I think I'd still make that same decision.
What's your point person for Franklin County? Or how does that work within your structure? Do you have a particular project manager or whatnot, and versus what, whether you guys running the entire organization, or how does?
So I think the easiest way to answer that is I've put 6,000 miles on my car in the past month. I'm spending about 3 to 4 days in St. Albans a week. But we do have phenomenal leadership. The entire administrative portion of Franklin Grand Isle from GMT joined RCT as well. So there's an operations manager who led Franklin for GMT and is now leading Franklin for rural community transportation. And my job is to really support him and make sure he gets all the resources he needs and help him cross barriers as they arise.
Representative White?
So just to make sure I'm understanding, RCT now oversees Franklin County, Grand Isle, Stowe Mountain area, and O&D in Chittenden County.
So currently, as of January 1, we have completed the portion of Franklin and Grand Isle.
Okay.
July 1, we will officially transition the Stowe Mountain Road and Chittenden County O&D,
Okay.
pending the VTrans grant application. So leading into this next cycle, RCT will include those portions in its next fiscal year grant application. And I would anticipate GMT will remove those from their grant application, and then VTrans will make their determination at that point.
Okay. And one other question on the union negotiations. Are you anticipating any difficulty with that, with the union negotiations? Like, for example, what you're paying drivers, are you having to level that up, or which would just increase costs? Just kind of trying to get a sense of what you foresee.
So entering into the transition, we kept the driver's wages, the union's driver's wages, as well as benefits level, which are often the most contentious elements. My anticipation of where the kind of changes may be are going to be purely operational. RCT monitors its drivers using AI dash-mounted cameras, which notify drivers when they, miss a stop sign or are not wearing their seatbelt, all those types of things. That possibly could be an issue of negotiation. Overnight discharges, weekend work, typical things. I think those fundamental, we kept level in anticipation and to make sure there was consistency of service. So I think it's going to be mainly focused on operational expectations and trying to capture some of those efficiencies, which we were looking for. And again, I mean, when they negotiated prior, they were negotiating with much larger units with diversified interests and a much different looking service, whereas now it's much more concentrated. So, RCT can advocate for the specific needs of the region, and the drivers can advocate for their specific interests of the 9 individuals represented, as opposed to trying to cover what is greatly diverse from interest, needs, services across GMT Urban as well as Washington County. So I think just the narrow of scope and interest should by nature make those negotiations far more amiable.
Representative Pat?
Yeah, thanks. So this sounds good. And I was wondering if did you run across any unforeseen or larger costs as part of this transition? You know, how were they covered? And then I'll assume Ross at some point will come back and say, hey, here's what the bus rates are, which I guess is where we're hoping to see some benefit. But it sounds like there might be some benefits just simplifying things for Green Mountain Transit and allowing you to do more of what you already are doing fairly well. But my question there was any unforeseen costs and how were they handled?
I think any unforeseen costs really lied in the technology. Negotiating purchase licenses. Going back to original contracts from 2010 to see if there was unused licenses to be carried over. And so that type of unexpected cost, but I think largely we're in line with what was expected. The efficiencies will take over time. Anecdotally, I think is a good example of where we will gain the efficiencies. So I walk in the bus garage the other day and the hood's up on a van. A 1 of 1 within the GMT system, but a 1 of 7 in the RCT system, and immediately recognized the code and was able to, systematically address. And it's that consistency of type of service, which I think the efficiencies will be gained. Is Franklin is so much like Lamoille and Orleans in many ways related to transportation services. So I think we're going to gain some efficiency there. We're already pulling, there may be a volunteer driver who lives in there is a volunteer driver who lives in J. And does it make more sense for him to drive to Newport to pick up a passenger or to hop over to Richford and take them down to St. Albans, right? Like that, the cohesion within Northern Vermont will fundamentally create efficiencies. And then I think some of those operational costs and addressing those over time. I think working with providers and addressing certain Medicaid compliance and needs is maybe an unexpected cost. What are the demands of the area as far as overnight discharges and things like that? But, both the service community as well as RCT are getting to know each other and scoping what those expectations may be. But we have chosen at RCT to segment all of Franklin and Grand Isle's finances. So when we make our VTrans grant application, O&D will have a specific line for Franklin and Grand Isle and Chittenden. When we receive Medicaid payments, we're receiving Medicaid payments specific to Franklin County. The intent of this is to really be able to provide measurable progress as it relates to whether we are gaining efficiencies as intended. So instead of letting it become brackish water of RCT's current operations, we're really, as much as we can, targeting segmentation of finances and expenses to create measurable outcomes. We've also recently received some planning funds from VTrans to do a RCT-wide efficiency study, which will establish KPIs for what is the foundation in Franklin County, and are we pulling the appropriate levers to make the progress that is intended from this transition.
Yeah, thanks. That's pretty complete. I don't know if Ross wants to add anything from his side, anything unexpected or that you learned from this to apply, again, somewhere else.
The artificial timeline is something that I regret saying this should happen when the start of the fiscal year happens, 12, 15 months down the road-ish. Very thankful that Caleb and his organization and GMT both agreed. Why wait? Let's do it. Some of those workforce anxieties, really, we just had to do it and then assuage those concerns. So that's one of the takeaways. We've been able to coordinate like the DMV transfer of 22 vehicles. And so Daniel was down there. We got the appointment, 2 people waiting for us and turned that around. We didn't expect that. And we didn't really have that on the radar. So we were getting those level of details for any other consolidations. we had 13 providers when I started. We're down to 6 providers. That sounds about right. I don't expect a lot of additional consolidations, but we are going to be saving some money on the administrative oversight, the processing of invoices from one fewer providers as we get operations admin, those types of things. And lastly, the setup of that foundation of baseline metrics to see really what are the differences in costs and efficiency. At some day, we're going to have to look in the rearview mirror and see how did we do, what did we expect to save, and what did we save? And all credit to Jim and Caleb for putting these things together.
Okay. Representative Thompson, if you're all set.
Thanks. So since we were just talking about O&D this morning quite a bit, I'm curious if any of the volunteer coordinators are shifting as a part of this transfer, or how that fits into this, if at all. And also, could you just explain how SSTA connects with this? If you're doing O&D if RCT is taking over O&D for Chittenden County, is SSTA still working with GMT, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, so the first part of your question as it relates to volunteers. So, given RCT's geographic nature, we have onboarded a Lamoille and Franklin volunteer coordinator, since those are the most geographically, and it makes sense to drive across that area from an outreach perspective. As it relates to SSTA, so SSTA will maintain its ADA relationship with GMT, whereas an RCT will be the recipient of Chittenden County O&D funds and subcontracting SSTA to both administer the O&D program and provide the transportation services within that region.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
You talk a little bit about KPIs in terms of some mention there, but also what's how do you measure user success? Franklin County, obviously, I'm a Franklin County rep. I hear a lot about services for Swanton, but I will get into that at some other point. But how do you measure where user satisfaction is today, and what's your plans to measure it a month or 2 months from now, 4 months? And how do you do that? And how do I answer, as issues come up, et cetera? How do you measure the users of Franklin County, the transition? There's a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Probably moving quicker than expected. Probably helps people not have to worry. A lot of people not have to worry because it's happening. But how do you measure where you're at today, and how do you measure how's this going to be defined as successful? Is one thing. How do you more specifically to the actual users in Franklin County? So how are you measuring it, and what's success going to look like?
So I appreciate that question, because it's an important conversation. I'm a KPIs data guy, and rider experience is one of those that's difficult to capture. I think, principally it's important, on New Year's Eve, we were, not me, luckily, although I did have to install all of them, but, representatives from RCT, V-Trans, and GMT were sitting in DMV to change over 23 vehicles. It was -5 when I was, all the screws were seized. But, aside from that, when the riders got on the vehicles, they were very familiar. That's kind of the administrative shift that I think there carried a lot of anticipation and anxiety for riders of how's this going to change for me? But, aside from a red plate to a green plate and, the uniform changes, it's the same drivers and the same vehicles. Where we are running into, some continued hesitation of experience is operational. What the call to verify a trip the night before, oh no, it's a different voice. Or, as we try to gain efficiencies, well, I was picked up at 6:23 for 6 months, and now RCT wants to pick me up at 6:20, right? Like those types of kind of habit forming, how can we gain efficiencies of scale in providing more transportation? So, I think one important factor is, are we providing more trips to a larger variety of individuals, right? That is an execution measurement. That is the quantitative KPI that I'll be presenting to this group. The qualitative aspect will take time, right? Is individuals who call and they're like, well, I just gave that information to GMT. And it's like, well, that document wasn't carried over in the transition of technology. And I appreciate your frustration. And we work very closely with DEVA to make sure there's not a duplicate of effort by riders to make sure I already proved that I'm Medicaid eligible. I've already proved that I don't have a vehicle. And so those back end things to make sure that the burden of the transition is not experienced by the riders. But the types of transitions, well, I never had to do this before, is really, the diligent work to, maintain RCT's Medicaid compliance, to work through our commitment to data integrity and all the kind of principal differences in the way organizations operate. As much as we can try to not carry that burden over the riders, a little bit of that will. And my hope is that on day one, they were getting into the same vehicles with the same drivers around the same time. Month 2, month 3, there's going to be procedural differences or slight changes in time. But my hope is by, month 4, month 5, month 6, they're bought in to the mission-centric operations and understand the intents behind what we're doing, and we're approving and providing more rides. So luckily, through the O&D program, we do customer surveys. Through the transit development plan, we'll be reaching out to communities for input and feedback. We also plan on holding community hearings so people can give us direct feedback of, hey, you changed this thing and I don't like it. But our best resource for that feedback and that qualitative measurement is from our drivers, because you better believe that they're hearing every dissatisfaction from the drivers. As much as all of you here, I could guarantee you that the drivers get a little bit more of it because, a trip down to Burlington or a trip to Boston provides plenty of opportunity for feedback. It's that open communication with the drivers and their safety and feeling they can share the feedback from the riders, and making sure that we're keeping the rider-centric focus. So it'll be difficult for a couple months. Change is hard, but my hope is that measurement of the qualitative comes out within the next 6 months.
Well, on January 26th, there's a Franklin County delegation's community breakfast, the legislative breakfast on the 26th. I suspect that this will come up as changes in the county and public transportation have almost always come up in legislative breakfast. That might be an event that you find the way one of your people likely might already be there, but that might be a piece. And my colleagues on the delegation are looking for me to make sure I have the answers that the public's going to have at that piece. So that's why I delved into it a little more than maybe some other subjects that I do. Usually I keep my chair hat on, but today I'm just rep from Swanton.
Yeah.
Is it working? Is it going to continue to work? I hear regularly additional services to Swanton. I hear that all the time, but the delegation's expecting me to answer to people are getting in and out of NMC, Northwestern Medical Center. They're getting to their appointments. They were all very nervous, but I haven't heard anything, but it already happened. So you're on the right track from the Cowboys perspective, but now there's the letters to the editors and the comments on the discussion pages and whatnot. So to be fair, I'm went a little further than I usually do as the chair, saying, so if you mention community hearing, they're going to want to know when.
Yeah.
And this one's pretty specific to me.
And I appreciate that, and please continue to do so. Okay.
Just had a question about the O&D program. Sounds like regionally they decide what they want to, cover and what they don't as far as trips. Is there option broad? And is there anything in there that we should take as legislators or take out of that discussion? I mean, I don't know. It sounds like they sort of get to choose of what they want to cover or where they're going to go. No? Or am I incorrect in that analysis? Sounds like they get to, or they're going to go to, Boston or wherever. They have some leeway there.
So
As these regions,
right, and it does go back to that kind of the principal intent of those committees is to examine the demographics of the community and forecast what is possible within their budget constraints. So, I know there are communities within Chittenden County that looked at the constraints and the parameters and said, no trips outside Chittenden County, right? We have providers who say, these are, we want to prioritize this type of ride. You have other communities like the Northeast Kingdom where it is every dime we can give to give these bare basic necessities. So depending on what the demographics are and the needs of that community, I will reiterate what was shared this morning is, dialysis remains one of the largest cost drivers of O&D. And so in the Northeast Kingdom, for instance, our dialysis provider is in Lancaster, or we're driving to St. Albans. So those costs tend to drain funds more often. Chittenden County, the dialysis providers are much closer and at a lower cost. So when you ask, is it at the discretion of those kind of regional providers, is if they're going through the demographic analysis and forecasting based off of their budget and anticipated needs, they're going to be able to calculate those constraints in line to get to the finish line of July 1 and have sustainable losses. I don't think any O&D committee is going forward saying, how do we maintain a surplus? It's what is the tipping point of how many trips and what types of trips we can give to go right up to that edge of the budget allotment.
That's well understood, and I'm not big on, I think years ago, there was a big kerfuffle about going to the casinos and stuff like that, giving that an option. Are those still like within the control of these committees to say, all right, yeah, we got a little extra, we're gonna make the trip to Foxwoods every month or something like that? And I'm just saying those, how broad is their?
You got Ross shaking his head.
Yeah.
I know he's gonna wanna say
I was just wondering how broad that is, their discretion. Not that, and I think you laid a quick picture.
Right.
Saying that there really isn't that much flexibility after you do the analysis or anything else.
And that's outside my experience. I kind of defer to Ross's broader input.
That was the social personal discussion, which is how do we not only provide essential services, but some quality of life connectivity too. The idea that, we're going to get a bus full of folks from the adult center or the age restricted place and bring them to Foxwoods. That precludes me as well. I'm not familiar with those types of trips, but it was more like I need to see my husband at the care facility or visit a friend, get to church, those types of church service, those types of things for social personal. Moving forward, we got to take a look at those trip constraints and really identify, are those trips currently the right set of priorities moving forward? And could vocational trips be better served with the Recovery and Job Access Program, taking some pressure release off of the O&D program? Those are the numbers we're going to be rolling up and sharing with the committee. And again, at that O&D summit in June, we'll be proposing updated guidance as well as updated expectations on the O&D committees to just try to reset expectations and hear from the other areas in the state to see what they think would be improvements to the O&D program.
Anybody else? So the transition has happened, it's smooth, it's all the same drivers. Nobody lost a job. Their underneath negotiations are starting imminently. And service changes, there may be some operational feel as the next couple of months go by. And as people work through and realize how many more rides are available on this focus, when we regroup and hear again about this in May, or the next time we're here back from thereafter, that's currently the plan and that's how things are going in Franklin County.
That is the plan, yeah. Is there, would anybody care for me to elaborate on the Stowe Mountain Road service? Is that fairly clear?
I thought you were gonna say it's still access. People going through the trucks.
Policy of no driving the buses through the notch, yeah.
Take over the Stowe Mountain bus service.
Yeah.
July 1st.
Oh,
That may be faster.
Along with the,
More, but
one other piece, some other part of Chittenden County, so changes on July 1st. But part of Orleans County transferred on July 1st, and I think that must be where we're headed. Oh. Representative King.
One thought, but I just assume we got a little bit of time, but your KPIs.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you developed those early. I mean, those are institutional. You do that.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you do. Okay, so was there any change in the underlying basis for those KPIs? They were the same when you make your transfer. In other words, are you being consistent in your measurements? Am I follow? You try to follow what I'm
I am
saying?
following. We did do kind of, and we're continuing to go through the process. I mean, luckily the historic data is the historic data, so we can still kind of baseline KPIs from that basis. We are kind of part of our consultation, so going out to contract, because getting someone smarter than me to assist with it is always good sage advice. To just say, hey, are these the right KPIs? Are there additional ones given the transition? So
My concern is, pardon me, my concern is that you have consistent relative measures so that you know what you had before, you actually improved it by changing, right?
Yep. And fortunately, we are, even if we change the parameters, we're able to mine the historic data to compare apples to apples. Yep.
Not knowing the KPIs that you deal with, but every business has indicators, and that those those indicators change, then you know what you have done, the effect of what you have done. So I'm seeing Ross shake his head. So it seems like we're going to have consistent measurements of the same thing.
Yes.
Regardless of what structure you have. You guys said that a little bit better.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. We will now, I guess, hear from Jim Moulton on the transfer in Washington County, I guess, or some pieces of that. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Walker. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the members of the committee. For the record, I am Jim Moulton. I am the Executive Director of Tri-Valley Transit. We currently operate in Addison, Orange, and Northern Windsor counties, and as we're here to talk about, we'll soon become the operator for Washington County as well. So we are on the target transition date of July 1. We are not as fast moving as Caleb and RCT. I will tell you that a major reason that we're not moving faster is because we are a unionized shop, already have been for well over 12, 13 years. And our union contract, our current Tri-Valley Transit union contract, is expiring on June 30th. So we are in the process of beginning negotiations. Not knowing the parameters of that, we wanted to make sure that we're integrating the current GMT workforce because they'll be obviously affected by the negotiations of the new contract. So we're providing an opportunity for their participation and input, and making sure that all of that will be taking place. So we remain on a July 1st. I think things are going well. We've had a lot of meetings between GMT leadership, Clayton and his administrative team, as well as my management team and other management staff. We've been having regular meetings and conversations for well over 6 months. It's all been positive. We've had visits between sites. GMT staff have come to our locations, our facilities in Middlebury and Randolph. We've gone to the Berlin site, and we're ongoing with those. Clayton hired probably 2 years ago what we call, it's a different title for them, but we call regional director. We have a regional director for Addison County. We have a regional director for Orange and Northern Windsor. And Monica White is the person who GMT has been relying on as their lead manager and director for Washington County. I've been working very closely with her for the past year, developing that relationship and setting her up for the expectations of how TVT operates and functions. It's been a great relationship, and I'm really excited to have her coming on board to be part of our team and provide consistency for all of the Washington County employees in terms of leadership on the ground. They're going to be working with her, and she's working closely with us. As part of our transition, we have already added the GMT board member, current GMT board member for Washington County onto our transition committee. So there's board representation from GMT already in terms of ensuring that what's been important for GMT employees remains in our site, and we're taking into consideration not only the employees but the community members. So that's an integration that we've already started. As Clayton noted earlier, there's been a lot of close conversations where he's been very good about giving us heads up about they're looking to make certain changes. Would this work with TVT once TVT becomes responsible? One of those has been developing an MOU with Sugarbush. There had never been an actual written document between Sugarbush and GMT outlining the responsibilities of both entities, and primarily and most importantly, I think, the level of fiscal support that Sugarbush would be providing. As you've heard in many years in committee meetings, all of public transit requires local funding to match and draw down federal funds. And those funds from Sugarbush are a part of that mix. But we were part of those conversations, which was great to begin the relationship building there. I heard a question earlier about volunteer coordinators. We have already worked closely with GMT to help them leverage an aging grant that they'd had but hadn't been able to execute upon, to hire a volunteer coordinator for Washington County. So that position has been in place since October. Which is great to add that into the mix. You've all heard in many forums about how important volunteer drivers are in terms of not only delivering service, but helping to manage costs. We've also established a new position that Washington County has not had before, something we call the community relations manager. This is a person whose primary role is to be the liaison with community members, with all of the human service agencies, with the select boards, and with other community members. That's been a critical role in TVT's prior success, to have somebody whose 100% focus is around that. You get to hear from, as Caleb noted, certainly drivers hear a lot, but it's great for people to have a liaison that riders can talk about what their hopes and dreams are for service. And we can work and plan and modify services that are currently in place, or build upon services that are not yet in place. So in a small twist of, I don't know quite if irony is the right word, but we had an open position for that in our Orange and Northern Windsor office. We made a hire over the summer. That person actually happens to live in Montpelier, and as we have moved towards the integration of Washington County, we're already going to be moving her from Orange and Northern Windsor, which will be a loss there, but into her own community and be the community relations manager for Washington County. So another resource that we're implementing even in advance of our official takeover, to build upon the promise of Washington County. So getting the volunteer coordinator in place, getting the community relations in place. We've just seen these as really important things to do, even ahead of our official assumption of the services. We've actually been helping GMT also leverage some grant money to fix some critical facility flaws that they've had in their Berlin office. Anybody with some historical knowledge knows that it's in a floodplain in Berlin, and was hammered originally by Tropical Storm Irene, and certainly again in the heavy rainstorms in the past few summers. So we're helping coordinate the use of those grant funds to fix some flaws in the building. Again, I guess an example of how we are collectively working closely to leverage our knowledge and information and expertise to help continue rebuild Washington County services. We've also had our IT consultant go in and do an initial assessment of all of the GMT hardware and software systems and help us develop a transition plan. Caleb alluded earlier to technology is a really big element of these transitions because so much of information, data, communication happens through newer information technology. So we are you may have heard in prior sessions also about a statewide dispatching software project. TVT was the lead agency for all the providers around the state in implementing the new dispatch software. It's being spread out around the state. It's not yet at GMT in Washington County. We are actively working with them to get that installed and implemented prior to the July 1st transition date as well. So again, another example of, even though we are not the official operator there, we are partnering very closely to move and build and expand on what's going on there. The partnership already is paying benefits in both directions. You know that GMT in Washington County operates a microtransit service, the MyRide service. Their software provider, VIA, has worked really closely with them and really done a great job with helping them build a really successful program. We have a different software program in Middlebury that we're using that we have been struggling with. And so we are working now with VIA to take advantage of their knowledge and skills and probably on a pathway where we'll be implementing that software in Middlebury. So another place where the scale that Caleb often alluded to of being a larger organization will pay benefits. TVT a number of years ago was the recipient of a grant for implementation of electric vehicles. Some of those grant funds are still available, and we're going to be using those grant funds to get a couple of electric vehicles for operation in Washington service as well. So another great example of what the partnership can do to leverage resources that one or other entities may have had, but been able to not use to this date, cross-pollination there. And it's really exciting from my perspective. And probably the last formal comment that I have is that we've certainly been paying close attention to Caleb and his team and what they've been learning in the transition around January 1st. So, good lessons learned there for what to look out for as we get closer to July 1st. I will say that TVT does have historical experience in transitioning services and operations. Ross mentioned that, gosh, now it was about 13 years ago that I was the executive director of Only Actor Addison County Transit Resources, and the agency came to us and asked if we would be in a position to help manage what was then Stagecoach in Orange and Northern Windsor in the Randolph area. They were going through leadership transitions and financial challenges. We took that on as a management contract for 3 years and then merged together to form TVT. So we've been through the experience of taking on another region and working to do that. I'm really proud of how seamless we made it. Caleb again spoke very strongly about how important it is for the riders and the communities to feel like things really haven't changed. It may be a different color of uniform, it may be a different logo on the bus, but it's the same people, the same service, the same treatment, in a positive way. And Representative Pouch knows this, but we also transitioned a couple of years ago. We had a collaborative service between Burlington and Middlebury on Route 116 through Heinsberg, and we transitioned to become the sole provider of that service, and has been very successful. And I feel good about how we've partnered with the town of Heinsberg in terms of their local support. We've seen in the couple of years, we've already seen a 20% increase in ridership. So again, another positive element of these types of consolidations and partnerships. So I'm happy to answer questions from anybody and everybody.
Thank you very much. Representative Pouch, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'll ask the same question, I guess. Any particular surprises and or costs being, kept whole through this process? Maybe, you mentioned the facility in Berlin, which I know for years has been a challenge for you. I don't know if that would be something you bring up, but just surprises and the financial changes, making sure it's not impacting Tri-Valley Transit.
Sure. I think this is going to sound a little funny, but I think in some ways the biggest surprise, I will be frank, and for 2 years or so, there's been a tremendous amount of media coverage around the struggles of GMT. And it's certainly been portrayed in the media as, like it's really bad, it's really this, it's really that. When I walked in to meet all the staff in Washington County, I was just incredibly impressed by the commitment of everybody there to the mission, to the service, the quality of people that have been serving. Clayton hired Monica. It's been a fabulous hire. I'm really incredibly lucky to be inheriting someone with her talent and commitment. And so I think that some of the media reports that have been across the past couple of years have been portrayed in an unfair way. It's been a great positive surprise, and it's just really energized me and the TVT teams and the Washington County employees, to feel like we're all on the same page. We all want the same successes for our riders and for our communities. So that's by far for me that biggest surprise. I wouldn't say from a negative, like, oh my God, like I just looked under that rock and there's an endless pit. We have not had any of those. Clayton and his team have been very transparent from the beginning, and that's been great. Yeah, I think the financial piece has certainly been talked about in prior sessions. About one of the goals and one of the hopes and dreams is that this transition will allow for some savings within operating the services there. Again, as Caleb mentioned in his testimony, we'll have to see as that works out. But I think some of the things I've mentioned already, taking languishing grants and being able to leverage them to be able to cross-pollinate with electric vehicles or to cross-pollinate with microtransit software. Those are the types of efficiencies that we can come up with, which will inevitably lead to cost savings, which, given inflation, may not always be really obvious right up front. But even if costs stay level, that is, in an inflationary environment, we would deem as a success.
Yeah, and I was gonna sort of save this to the end and just let this committee know and anybody listening. I've worked with some the transit agencies, and seeing Caleb here talk about his agency, I'm really impressed on how passionate the people that I've met in this group are to provide transit. In a way, it sort of reminds me of like when you run across healthcare workers who just seem to be working really hard and they must be passionate about it to put themselves out there. I do see that same thing. So Jim, as you had said, there's a mission and people are dedicated to this mission to provide transit for people who need it. And it's making our communities that much better. So even though we hear the complaints, every day, thousands of people, have gotten their ride, their much needed ride, and, can get on with their life.
Yeah. I do want to actually, Representative Pouch, you prompted me to remember that, Chairman Walker, you had asked specifically about customer satisfaction and, ridership and sort of, the before and after. We are already working with Monica and her team. We'll be doing a survey of bus riders in the upcoming spring, probably in March. It's something that TVT does every year for all of its riders. So it's something we're very, user satisfaction, rider satisfaction is a really important metric. You know, we have our standard set of questions that we ask in terms of do people feel safe? Do they feel it's convenient? It's flexible? Is it meeting their needs? All these kinds of things. So we will be doing a sort of before version of that. We also do ongoing surveys of our Dial-A-Ride riders. And so gathering that information now as a baseline, because I know that the committee feels that's important, but then also we do that annually. So we'll get that kind of feedback going forward as well, you know, in fiscal year 27 and beyond. So I just wanted to make sure I followed up on that question as well.
Thank you. Clayton, you had, I wasn't sure if your hand was up or not there. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I was going to add to the answer of the question that Representative Pouch had about a surprise, because I wanted to share a surprise that I had that shows really how human this work is. But before I do that, I want to say, Phil, we miss you on the GMT board, so thank you for your past service there. On New Year's Eve night, I was at St. Albans, and I was super impressed by the RTT staff that were working late there to get things running. But I was also talking with the people that were leaving, because, you know, we had family members of ours that were, you know, leaving to go to RCT. And the thing that I heard over and over from them was how excited they were about RCT's jackets, because they were so much nicer than the ones that GMT had. And that they're in these jackets, you know, like 10, 12 hours a day, and that how that improves their life so immensely. And it just like, you know, it's the simple things that often really are the most important.
Yeah.
Representative White?
Yeah, Jim, thank you for your report on the transition. I look forward to TVT coming into the Mad River Valley. And so I have a comment and a question. My comment is, we would love to see one or two of those electric buses in the Mad River Valley, if you're looking for places to deploy them. We have a lot of enthusiastic environmentalists there. But my question, you had talked about in the transition, you identified some grant funding that hadn't been deployed to use for upgrading the facility, the bus facility, and there was something else. So I'm just curious, like, how does it happen that there are grant funds that came from Tropical Storm Irene that hadn't been deployed?
No, I didn't mean to indicate that those grant funds had been sitting around for, you know, almost 10 years. No, just, you know, there are situations where grant funds can be awarded that they can't be leveraged at the beginning of, like, when they're first out there. Just random circumstances come up. With our electric vehicles, as an example, they were originally intended to be used for cutaways, the type of vehicles where, you know, they're basically built on the platform of, you know, Ford trucks. But for a long time, they were not available anywhere in the US that were FTA approved. There's a very special process to go through FTA approval, and we couldn't get a hold of cutaways. So now we're purchasing smaller vehicles, electric vans. So sometimes there are those kinds of situations where funds may be awarded, but for whatever reason, something gets in the way. And where I was really trying to emphasize is that by bringing GMT and TVT together, even in, you know, this collaborative process before the transition, has enabled us to generate the use of more resources. It's really, the teamwork has really been a way for us to jumpstart some of these grant funds that haven't been, you know, necessarily used immediately. You know, there's a million things that go through procurement, our procurement staff at either organization. Procurement in the transit arena is a very complicated thing. The rules and regulations we have to abide by, the process we have to go through to do that. Sometimes, you know, one staff person or one staff department may be overwhelmed, but the other staff department has some capacity. And we've been using those situations to take advantage of some of these situations. So more a testament to what the working together and collaborative process has been to, you know, the goal of this whole transition, you know, as Ross sort of began from the beginning was like, how do we take the resources we've got and do a better job with them, be more efficient, be more effective? And these are just examples of how that's happening through this process.
I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions or input or comments? Okay, well, I think we got through this portion of our agenda a little quicker, certainly when it's that positive.
Yeah.
Goes faster. So thank you very much for being here. Clayton, thanks for coming in multiple times today. Same with you, Caleb. Ross, that's part of your day-to-day job. Did I miss? I'm sorry, Dan Courier was on a list. Did you cover what?
We're just providing content, making sure there's somebody here. No matter what.
Okay.
We're all set.
There. Anybody else have any last comments? Then thank you very much. And
Thank you.
we're going to adjourn for a short break and we're going to come back for committee discussion at 2:15.